And then we listened to the Marin interview after that.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're wondering why I'm so sad?
Yeah.
Is that what the question is?
Yeah. we just want to dig even deeper.
Yeah.
Those issues.
We're gonna need a big show. We're gonna need a bigger. We're gonna need a big show. We're gonna need a big show with Mike, Kim, and guests.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to We're Gonna Need a Bigger Show, episode, I don't know what.
56.
56?
Yep. That's where we are.
Year and a half, 56 episodes. It feels
Cool.
good.
You actually will need a bigger show.
Right, at some point
Yeah.
we're going to.
Yeah.
Today's a really special day for us.
Yep.
We are here with Pat Healy.
Hello. Hi, guys.
Pat, thank
Excellent
you
intro.
so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
We're here at the Chattanooga Film Festival. How's it been so far?
Great. I got in pretty late the night before last, and then yesterday was, reception, and then I saw the film A Girl Walks Home Alone
What
at
did you
night, which
think
I
of
hadn't
that?
seen. Yeah, it's really good.
It was wild.
Yeah.
We saw it in Nashville.
It's like beautifully shot movie.
I was shocked that it was shot in California.
Yeah. It's a movie that takes place in Iran. It's
Yeah.
like Iranian vampire western, I guess is what they call
Yeah,
it.
and it just looks so authentic.
black and white scope,
Yeah.
old anamorphic lenses, so it's
Nuts.
looks
Nuts.
great. Yeah.
That one really blew me away. Just from kind of start to finish. You need
Yeah.
to check that out.
Yeah. Iranian vampire western.
There you
don't
go.
have to tell me anything.
It's the first one.
Yeah.
The very first. Well, thank you for sitting down with us.
Thank
today.
you.
Really appreciate it. We're both big fans, so this means a lot.
Thanks.
We talked a little bit about that. In our research, I mean, we obviously listened to the Movie Crypt interview. We listened to the Marin interview, and one of the things that really struck me was just you have a lot of thoughts on craft and filmmaking. I kind of want to talk about that for a while today.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll start at the beginning. Just early on in growing up, what was your exposure to film and acting?
Well, in my house, I have three brothers, two older brothers and one younger brother. My parents were always very much into the arts, so we were all encouraged at a really early age to do things. Two of my brothers are musicians. My brother is 2 years older than me, and I are sort of the film geeks. So he's in the restoration and preservation and film presentation. Now, formerly of the George Eastman House, Rochester, New York, and Chicago International Film Festival, and now head of the University of Wisconsin Cinematheque and Wisconsin Film Festival.
Wow.
And then
You've already got an in those.
Yeah, exactly. I'm headed there after this, actually, just to show The Astrologer. Have you guys seen that movie yet?
No.
Oh, it's great. But, we were always, there's a lot of, books and records and things in the house. And then, in those days, it was, going to the movies a lot because, I'm old enough to I didn't have a VCR until I was, 13, 14 years old.
Right.
We didn't have cable until I was, 12 maybe. So it was, seeing old films on television. If you were lucky enough to see them on public television, you could see them uncut, but mostly they were cut. A lot of the Universal horror movies are short enough to fit in the commercial slotted, 90 minutes.
Sure.
Because they're, 70, 75 minutes sometimes. So a lot of those, but mostly really comedy was an early obsession. So having anything to do with Saturday Night Live or SCTV, which was my world, and sort of SCTV certainly still kind of is. Like a lot of so much comes from my sensibility comes from that. Just as a person.
Have you ever pursued doing any kind of?
Oh yeah, I do comedy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, like.
I had a sketch group in LA, and I've done stand up, and I still do sketch. I just hosted a sketch show at UCB in LA called The Midnight Show, which is sort of like their Saturday Night Live. They do it once a month at midnight and have a guest host. So I do that stuff all the time. What happened with me is I was into that stuff really heavily and seeing stuff on television, edited for television, things like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Scorsese's film Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, and Paper Moon and What's Up Doc, and a lot of those sort of more adult films as a kid edited for television The Exorcist, which scared the shit out of me. My father told me it was a true story too, so I was like, and my father had been in the seminary training to be a priest at one point, so told an 8-year-old kid that it was a true story. And that was an edited for television version. So then when I'm
curious to know if there are any of those that you saw as a kid edited, and then you saw the real one later on.
Well, the most remarkable one was, I would say, it was probably 1980. They showed National Lampoon's Animal House on NBC.
Right.
Okay.
Which was, that version was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. And 2-3 years later, when I saw it on cable, my head exploded.
Yeah,
I couldn't believe that what I was missing, but I already loved it. And, it remains one of my favorites. But, it's really wild. Like, you'd see the Planet of the Apes on the 3:30 movie right after school, and it's like, I think it's about a 2-hour movie, and it was a 90-minute time slot with commercials.
Right.
So, it would start, and they'd already be, being chased by the apes on the planet. You don't know, the ending makes no sense at all,
2001 starts, open the pod base.
2001 was funny. My brother and I actually went to, in the town we grew up in, the suburbs of Chicago, Arlington Heights, northwest suburbs. They had a great public library. In fact, we just stopped there when we visited last year, and it smells exactly the same. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But they had an amazing, library of, books, of course, but record albums and things like that. But they would show films in 16-millimeter prints of things. And we went to see 2001, shortly after Star Wars had come out, because we were like, oh, man, we're going to see this now. Right. I think we left after about a half an hour, what the hell is this? Boring. Now it's top 3 movies. it might be the best movie ever made, but I have my favorites. But I'm actually going to see it in 70mm at the Cinerama Dome. I've seen it in 70, I think 3 or 4 times, but this is the first time I'll be able to see it in the Dome in Hollywood when I get back.
That's incredible. Because
they always show this digital print, and I'm just like, I can watch a Blu-ray at home, but the 70 print is beautiful. I saw a new one the Academy made a couple of years ago at the Academy Theater.
They just did Lawrence of Arabia, and I'd kill.
Yeah, they show that a lot out there in 70 at the Cinematheque.
We have a local art house theater. It's called the Belcourt. It's in Nashville.
Oh yeah, some of my stuff is played there. Yeah.
Cheap Thrills played there.
Yeah, I just have never been to Nashville because every time it's like something else is going on. Like there's been films that's played at the festival there and things, and I haven't been able to make it. I think even my short that I directed years ago played there, but
at the festival.
Yeah, there was always, I was working or something was going on.
They I always check when they do retrospective screenings. I'm like, was it digital or 35? Or whatever.
It matters if you're going to go, especially lay down a few bucks. So I was always interested in acting. I was doing. I think what I wanted to be doing was making films and how being involved in movies. However I could. Acting was just what I knew how to do. Kids growing up in the 70s and early 80s didn't have access to all the stuff that they have now. So we did have a Super 8 projector, my camera. My brother and I made a silent Super 8 film called The Killer Cookies, which was like a silent, monster movie with the Oreos. Yeah. I remember we threw ketchup over our little baby brother, who was probably 5-6 years old at the time, and he was just traumatized. No, he was probably like 3 or 4. He was traumatized. But
between that and The Exorcist being a true story, this sounds.
Oh, it's just a fun house. Yeah. No therapy here.
Right. Yeah. Now it's starting to.
Yeah, it's starting to make sense to you a little bit. Yeah.
There are places to lay down in here if you want to.
No. I do that twice a week at home. It's fine. And then so then around junior high, I guess maybe 12. I had seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was certainly something that was on television and some things like that. But the one that really did it was and I think I talked about that on Marin, was the Pope of Greenwich Village, because I'd seen Mickey Rourke in Diner and Body Heat and maybe one other. But that was my mom took me to see that. Occasionally you'd get to see a special movie.
Right.
She took me to see that, and I just flipped my wig, and then I just wanted to be him. So I think maybe I might have gone the route of comedy, because in Chicago that strain with Second City and everything is just as strong as the so-called legitimate theater that I was a part of, there was just Steppenwolf. Those are huge things, but they're separate worlds.
Yeah.
They rarely cross, even though they're right down the street from each other. So, but it was that moment, and that's he's my gateway drug to De Niro and Brando and all that stuff. And then every young guy wants to be the brooding, angry young man.
Yeah.
And since I felt that way naturally anyway. That was sort of where my focus tended to go, in a really heavy Mickey Rourke, Robert De Niro, Marlon Brando obsessions that continue to this day. And then sort of getting into college and doing some of the sketch stuff, but not really picking it up again until long after I was out in L.A. I'd been in L.A. about 6 years before I started. I had a lot of friends who did comedy, and the short film that I had made was a comedy, but I hadn't acted in a lot of comedies.
Sure.
And, I'd tested for many pilots, some of which were half-hour comedies, but I never got the job. So it was just something I started doing, and I had a natural affinity for it because I have a respect for it. And stand-up is something that is very... that's you got to be your life's work if that's what you're going to do. You have to dedicate yourself to it. And I didn't have the... I certainly didn't have the patience. I probably didn't have the, ability unless I really wanted to focus on that. And I love this other stuff so much. So that's just sort of the way it went. And
I have a question about doing the sitcom pilots. Did you end up in a certain kind of role a lot, or was it kind of all over the place? Were you like
when I was testing for stuff? Yeah, I was usually some kind of the buddy guy. Yeah. But probably not too different from something you've seen me do, like in Innkeepers or something.
Sure.
Just at the end of the day, there's who knows what kind of considerations. There's also all kinds of physical considerations and type, that they go for, because television is such an immediate medium, and it's pumped right into your home, and they really want that specific type so that they don't have to explain the character to anybody. You know what I mean? They just want that person that can pop and say those lines. It's not putting it down. It just is its own thing. And
one of the things that you because you call it the roles that you've taken on, you call them fringe characters, and that was really interesting to me. I wonder, because you said that you had this affinity for like Mickey Rourke and the kind of tough guy actors, and the roles that you've taken tend to be these fringe characters. And I wonder when did you come to that kind of agreement with yourself that you were like, okay, maybe like...
I don't think it was a conscious decision. I mean, I think that a lot of what people don't understand is that you get cast in what you get cast in. You're not necessarily... I mean, I'm choosing things to a certain degree, but more likely than not, if I'm being offered a role in something, it's, I'm going to take it. Physically, I'm not a tough guy. So it's like I certainly could work on that if I wanted to, but even in my, best shape, I'm wiry. I'm not a bruiser. So
I think the upside to that is the tough guys tend to puff out. When
maybe
you don't seem to be puffing out.
Oh, good. Well, that's nice. Good to know. I'm trying to lay off the beer, especially while I'm here. But I think what unconsciously happens on both my part and the part of the people that are making the films is whatever's going on with me, I have felt, to varying degrees, throughout my life, a bit of a fringe character,
Sure. And
even though I'm very sociable and I get along with people well, and I like people, and I do, feel differently inside, and I think that there's something that comes particularly from years of psychoanalysis and therapy, which is you learn an empathy for yourself,
right,
and that gives you great empathy for other people as well. So probably any kind of character that I would take on that might seem unsympathetic on the page or to the untrained eye, to me it's not even a conscious decision. I'm immediately looking for those things to relate to,
right,
and make them relatable. And I'm not concerned with this likability thing, which is a misnomer that people use a lot. Sure. That you have to like a character, or that you even have to like the character that you play. You know, it's they need to be interesting.
You have to find something in them.
Yeah, they need to be compelling to watch, and you need to understand them. And that's really what I'm primarily concerned with is you know, what we do as artists is you know, illuminate you know, things about the human condition or humanity, and I want people to understand what's going on. Right. It's okay if you don't like them, but if you find it interesting, you'll watch it for half hour or an hour or 90 minutes or 2 hours.
That was one of the interesting things when it may have been, I think it was the Maron show where you talked about compliance. Mm-hmm. The visceral reaction that people have to that.
That was the most difficult one, even for me, to wrap my head around to do.
But just like wanting to open up that dialogue with people and be like, well, let's talk about this. You know, why? You know, what is the you know, what is the reaction? And then when you kind of spoke about you yourself, just finding those things in the character.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of self-hatred that I think all of us can relate to on some degree. You Absolutely. Know, like I said, at different times of my life. And you know, it can pop up at the oddest times, and you don't even know that you're, you know, doing this sort of self-loathing. But it's an understandable trait. It's I think probably universally, you know, felt, but it's not universally acknowledged.
Right.
And what happens a lot is things get under people's skin unconsciously, and they react in the way that they feel uncomfortable. Right. And they react to what they understand, they see, which is, you know, the big word is this offends me.
Right.
And they're not quite sure why it offends people. And this is why we have people making legislation about things that don't have anything to do with, you know, politics or any issue. You know, it's something inside someone's self that makes them uncomfortable. You know, it's not to say that it's not so simplistic as to say, you know, an anti-gay politician is secretly gay or anything like that. It's just that they're not uncomfortable with getting in touch with that part of themselves. Sure. And they might find that, like, look, I'll look at that and see what that is, and there's nothing there, you know. But they won't even acknowledge that there is a feminine side to them. So what's happening with compliance, and a lot of what compliance is about, and why you know, in Craig Zobel's analysis of the situation, the real life situation that happened, at least in part, was that people who think that kind of thing would never happen to them and could never happen to them, and that they would never do that, are much more likely to do something than someone that goes like, you know what, it might be possible that I could get myself in this situation, so I'm going to keep my eyes open.
Sure.
You know, because I don't know what I'm capable of, you know. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging something about that, about yourself. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just acknowledging that there is a part of all of us as human beings that might do something, quote unquote, wrong. And it's always the people that, and we find those people in the Q&As, and you find those people online. You find them everywhere, you know. They're the ones shouting about how unbelievable it is, or saying, you know, it promotes rape culture or something like that, which is absurd. I mean, it's, you know, if any movie doesn't promote that, it's that, you know, that's the opposite of that. That some sort of form of exploitation or something was really quite shocking and surprising to hear from people.
How do you deal with, like, that specific criticism? I mean,
well, that was, you know, the first screening at Sundance we were blindsided by it, quite frankly. You know, a woman was screaming, rape is not entertainment, you know, as soon as the credits started rolling.
Jesus.
And we said, we agree, let's talk about it, what's going on. And she was very upset. I don't know what was going on. And there were a few people like that in the audience, and they all seemed to have, you know, some sort of emotional reaction, visceral reaction to it. And, you know, it triggers people for other reasons, too. Absolutely. There are people who are legitimate, you know, victims of things, and whether they're conscious of it or they're suppressed, you know, things, it triggers something in people and they react. And I certainly understand and empathize with that a lot. But I think there was a lot of, you know, that this is dumb and that would never be me, or the thing that I think makes reality television so popular now is, oh, look at the people that I'm so much better than, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not me, and it's like, well, movies can be windows or they can be mirrors. They can be both.
Sure.
We have a lot of windows now. We have a lot of these things that are superhero movies and things like that. And it's not to say there's anything wrong with those. We all enjoy those. But we don't have enough mirrors. And I don't think people like mirrors very much right now.
I think that's...
I was thinking when you're talking that it's kind of... It goes back to the politicians thing that you mentioned earlier about the legislation. It's like some people are way more concerned with being offended than they are about why they might be offended.
Right.
Like actually going any deeper than, just being outraged.
Right.
But then also I feel like, in you talking about, trying to relate to the character and all that kind of thing, that's sort of the process of looking over that cliff. Whereas,
of course.
Whereas, denying the fact that you quote unquote could ever do that is denying the fact that there's a cliff in the first place. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, or the abyss or whatever you want to call it. I mean, in some of these roles, particularly Compliance and Cheap Thrills, I've talked a little bit about this. Like, the biggest difference between doing those two movies, which were, shot a couple years apart almost, was that, during the time of Compliance, I wasn't in a great place personally, and probably hadn't fully grasped. I mean, I'm still learning. I fully grasped the tool of being able to look into the abyss and reel myself back up again. That's really important because you get stuck in it, and it's really dangerous for your life, and it could be really bad for the work too, because you sometimes see stuff that's just too much. And it's too painful to watch, and sometimes that's important to see. But sometimes you see someone, it sort of breaks the movie because you're watching someone suffering, and that can be a bit much. I mean, by the time I got to Cheap Thrills, I had figured out, certain ways to reel myself back, And I think it's just that in that acknowledgement that you're talking about, which is that it's just a trip that you're going on, and you're going to go back home at the end of the day, So there's something in the back of your mind that allows you to go there, and you can believe that it's real for every moment that it's happening, but, know how to shut it off.
Sure. That's, really interesting. You've talked about your personal life while both movies were happening. You talked about, just that idea of stepping away, reeling yourself back. Because it just would stand to reason, even, on Cheap Thrills, you're just putting so much of yourself out there.
Yeah.
That it's, I think that's a really interesting idea of being able to pull yourself.
Well, and there's an important distinction, too, between, using all of personal experience, which would be something that somebody like Lee Strasberg was, very much interested in. But Stella Adler, from the same, branch of the actor studio, really believed a lot more in script analysis and imagination, and I tend to fall into that category more. But you're always going to be drawing from your personal experiences in some way. It's just a question of how much you want to put yourself out there, and sometimes you surprise yourself. That scene in Cheap Thrills after I chop my finger off is incredibly cathartic, but I can only prepare so much in that, and I'll talk about some of this in this, acting thing that I'm going to do this weekend here, is just choosing a really strong action for the scene.
Sure.
You can't go like, I'm going to play hurt here, or I'm going to play sad here, or whatever, because it will come off as manufactured. Even if the audience isn't conscious of it, there will be something that won't really, penetrate. And so you play the action, and then this well of stuff that's inside me, for all my life, comes out. And it's really interesting because the layers, there's the the screaming, which is like the anger.
Right.
And then beneath that is sadness. and then laughter comes out.
Right, yeah.
So really you're thinking about when people are covering up, say, people are angry about something or other, or outraged, as you were talking about, or offended. They're really like upset in some way and sad if they could get past that anger. And strangely enough, past the sadness is some kind of joy, because there's a incredible cathartic release. As painful as that looks, it was incredibly cathartic. I mean, I've never felt better, quite honestly.
So did that make it, I mean, the famous story related to that is that they lose the tape.
It got lost,
right?
yeah.
They lose the tape for that tape.
Well, what's interesting about that is that, somebody got... I was just watching Tootsie again, where the guy spills the seltzer on the celery seltzer tonic on the tape, and they have to do it live, and that's when he decides, he's going to, show who he is.
Right.
And, I was, I think you can see it on the making of, on the disc, and you can see I'm destroyed.
Yeah.
I luckily had the prosthetic makeup on, so I couldn't, get too outraged or it would all come off.
Right.
But it kept me sort of zen in a way. And then, I was like, well, it's gone, so I have to do it again. And I wasn't sure. But I had the confidence from having done it. I might have explained this on the other show, that it was like a tap, a valve opened up and it stayed open.
Right.
And that's another thing that's there. It's not open all the time. It's not like, the gate that's just like, spraying sparks all the time. Right. It's like it closes too, but when I need it, I now trust in myself that it's there and it's accessible.
And that's sort of something that's come with age.
That's come with age and experience, yeah. It's just doing this a lot, that whole sort of Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hour rule, I think, applies to my job as well as any others. I've just logged a lot of hours doing this, and that goes for the, that's somewhat... There's technical things which are like, where's the light, where's the camera, where's the mic, where's, where do I need to be blocking-wise and all that stuff. And then there's the internal work that you do as an actor. And then
it's a colossal amount of stuff.
The thing we're talking about is all of that together.
I will say your blocking today is excellent.
Thank you. I've planned it all out. Yeah. We got a floor plan. But, it's, all that stuff together with experience and age gets to the place where you don't have to think about that stuff, and then you can just show up and, if you've done your prep work, your internal prep work, and, prepared yourself physically, like such the case with, like, Cheap Thrills. There's a lot of physical preparation that goes into that so I don't get sick or hurt or whatever. Right. Then you can just show up on the day and do, as Spencer Tracy said, just know your lines and don't bump into the furniture. Right. I mean, it's a joke, but it's like, it's one of those things that's really true, because he was saying that because not like it's an easy, I think it's interpreted often as like it's this easy thing that anyone could do. Right. He could do that because he had done all the work, he'd show up, he was Spencer Tracy, right. and as long as he knew his lines and didn't bump into the furniture, he was going to be great,
right.
He had
There's
that
still
quality.
Some unpacking involved in that statement,
right.
though. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think it's, there's a danger in this sort of putting down of the craft that, people that I really respect, like Brando or Anthony Hopkins do. And, and there's a danger in pumping it up too much, obviously. As we've seen too many people on Entertainment Tonight. I think what the character is, it's like, isn't this Fantastic Four 8? That would be like a something that one of my acting teachers, Joan Shekel, would say, know how deep the pool is before you dive in. You don't want to hurt yourself, Right. You might be doing a guest spot on, NCIS Baton Rouge, and you don't want to, go too deep.
That's good advice.
Yeah. But, I mean, these are all things that, I'm watching my work getting better and my life get better, and my internal life get better, and the proof of that is that I can actually watch it now, whereas like I can go back and look at stuff when I was younger. I'd say before Great World of Sound, which we shot in 2005, so I was in my early 30s, and I can certainly see the talent and the ability, and then maybe there's a certain presence there, but it's really difficult for me to watch because I really don't think I knew what I was doing. And I felt that about my life, too. I really didn't think I knew anything until I was, 33 years old.
So one of the things you just said was that, as you've gotten older, you've seen an improvement in your life and an improvement in your work. We talked a little bit about it earlier. I said I've become a vegetarian. I've quit drinking.
Yeah.
I'm about to turn 30, and it becomes this thing of...
Good for you.
Thank you. It becomes this...
No, I mean, it's important to do it early because, your patterns get more set later on, and also it's just you look at Leonard Nimoy. He quit smoking when he was 50, and he spent 30-some years in pain.
Right.
And
I mean, well, the thing that I think is interesting, that the parallels I've drawn, you said you saw the improvement. What do you think informed what? Do you think your life informed your work, or do you think your work informed your life?
Well, I think it's it's all part of the same thing, and I try not to separate it too much. There's obvious separation,
Sure.
But therapy for me was the great leveler.
Right.
That was the getting to know myself.
Right.
And I think that what makes the work good or makes work bad, when I see it, at least from my interpretation, is someone that's not in touch with themselves or their feelings, or don't seem to be playing any kind of recognizable human characteristics,
Yeah.
and seem to be, people do a lot of indicating of emotion, or I'm supposed to be feeling that, and we as audience members have a shorthand, and we'll understand and follow the story along, but we might not feel it as deeply.
Sure.
And I just think that I had a real desire for as long as I can remember to be understood and to understand myself. And to be understood is obvious to get into the line of work I'm doing, which is essentially communication, between myself and many different people I'm working with in the audience. And to understand, to look inward, help me understand everything outside.
Sure.
And when you have that empathy for yourself, the self-love, you tend to give a lot of people, cut a lot of people some slack.
I think it's relatable in that. I mean, I feel the same way. We're both directors, and I feel like that's definitely the same kind of thing. You have to know yourself before you can really, you start to put so much into that work, and you have to, again, you have to be able to pull yourself back and
it still happens. I find myself on a road, and been doing something for a while, and I'm just kind of sort of coming out of a period of about a year where I kind of felt like I had some challenges in my life, and and I'm sure the work is good, but I didn't feel growth.
Sure.
But then sometimes you see that work a year later or 2 later, and you see it. You didn't necessarily feel it. And but I constantly want to be challenging myself and growing. Sure. You don't have to do that in a painful way. Every bit of growth doesn't have to be some smack in the head, that you give yourself or put yourself through some gauntlet of, horribleness. But, it tends to happen that there are times when things stack up against you and, pile up and get worse. And the nice thing about being older is I've been through it enough to know that things always get better again, and you can just hang in there and continue to try and grow. And everything's not your fault, so it's not to say that growth is all about what am I doing wrong? You know what I mean? Sometimes it's really just holding on really tight. I mean, obviously what happened in 2008 with the economy is not any of our fault.
Right. But
we were all suffering from it, and I'm really just recovering from it now.
Sure.
And it's really important. That's something you can do when you get older too. Is learning not to internalize everything which you do, whether you admit it to yourself or not, all the time when you're younger. Just what am I doing wrong? And I was raised Catholic, so I was really doing it.
Yep.
and I'm part Jewish, so it's like
the
like yeah, it's just like a whole like thing, and that's something I only recently discovered, but it makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's just I think it's the work that I do. I'm so happy with, not only because I have a long time, lifetime love affair with it all, but that it is analogous to leading a good life from my perspective, which is just digging deep and trying to understand and grow from things and trying to communicate that to others. So.
Right.
To your point about growth and your career and your craft, whatever that may be, I remember reading there was this new agey book I picked up at a Barnes and Noble one time, just passing time, and the only thing that stuck with me is it said something like the path of improvement is basically like walking through fog. Like you can't see. It's a lot of time hard to judge how far you've come or where you are exactly, but you are walking forward.
Yeah.
So there's something.
Well,
that
was like the famous baseball player Satchel Paige, who was one of my father's heroes. He used to say these incredibly simple things, but they were profound. And he said, "Don't look back. Somebody might be gaining on you." It's like really like. He also said, "Don't eat fried foods. They scurry up the blood." Many years before people were saying it, but you just keep going.
Yeah.
I say that to a lot of people who, and this came up on the Movie Crypt podcast, obviously, like, there's people that are really bad off inside. And I've been there. Sometimes just the fact that you have people that love you and are going to be destroyed if anything happens to you is enough to just keep going, this past year, just from a financial perspective, it's really great to have come to a place where I have the respect of my peers and the audience, and I'm getting constant affirmations of that. And sometimes it doesn't change the fact that you can't pay your rent. Sure. You know what I mean? Yeah. But it also doesn't negate it either. Right. You can take it in.
Sometimes and then you have to separate the two.
Yeah, absolutely, a lot.
Yeah.
But now things have turned around again, and they're fine. And I'm like, well, I know that that's going to happen, and I guess it makes it easier to get through it now. But it's still in the moment. It's just like, those day-to-day things drive you crazy. And I never think anymore like, this is hopeless or things aren't going to get better. But it's still hard to get through, but not as hard. There were times when I just thought, I just don't know what I'm going to do, There's something really powerful in surrender, too. And I don't, I'm not a religious person, or I don't even know if I would necessarily call myself a spiritual person, but in the same way that I'm constantly struggling to understand myself and others, and I'm trying to understand the universe, and I think there's great mystery to the way the universe works. And just recently, like in the last few weeks or last month or so, it's been building up over the last year. I've said a number of things out loud, which is just like, look, I guess I'm just going to have to do this or that, or I'll take this job, or my quality of life is suffering so much. I just and then then the next day there's a phone call, and then there's and it's like, I don't know what that is, but that's happened a lot, right, like in my life, where you just kind of let go, and maybe it's just a releasing a tension that I don't know, for lack of a better phrase, just because I don't have a firm belief system in place other than what I work on in therapy is, some energy shifts somehow, and things end up being all right.
Sure.
You can't control everything. That might even be the biggest lesson about growing up, is just this idea that you can control everything.
Right.
And there are things that you can control, like you're talking about, like changing up your diet and things like that are absolutely things that you can control. But there's a whole world of external circumstances that you can't do anything about.
Well, it's very much this thing of figuring out, at least for me anyway, is figuring out what can I control and what can't I control.
Yeah.
Because I was in a spiral of it was going bad fast.
Yeah.
And it was this thing of really taking a hard look and saying, okay, now I can do this, and maybe that'll help improve my quality of life, which it has tremendously.
Right.
But then things, like specifically like we're working on a new film, and like when things don't move quite the way you want them to, and you just can't control that all the time. You do the work that you can, and just make that. You have to make that distinction always.
Yeah, because you could really beat yourself up.
Yeah.
And then you just make it worse, and you actually put yourself farther from your goal.
Sure.
You're less capable.
Absolutely.
Because you've reduced yourself to this, loser who's, incapable of getting this thing done, and this thing is impossible.
Right.
As a younger person, did you get really like if you didn't get a part, or the sitcoms they didn't get picked up, like that kind of thing? Was that something you took really hard?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's still happening. Rejection is still one of the hardest things about what I do, and the sitcoms and stuff, like it was always this double-edged sword where I could get mad at myself because it was something I didn't want to do in the first place. But when you test for something, so you audition for the the creatives, and they say, like, we're bringing you to the network, executives. They make you sign the contract so you see how much money you're going to get.
Before it's even.
Yeah, and it's like you and two other people.
Yeah.
So then you're really invested in getting it. And when you don't get it, you're not only depressed that you didn't get it, but you're pissed at yourself that you got excited that you wanted it,
You made those plans.
It's
for that
horrible.
paycheck,
It's such a vicious cycle, and like, I don't know how you get out of that. Like, it's crazy, because, yes, there are things definitely that I really wanted that I didn't get. There are things that went away that were going to happen. We went in a different direction or whatever, recently there was something I really wanted, and they cast a much older person.
Sure.
That was clearly what they wanted.
Right.
It has nothing to do with me,
Right.
And so I have to look at all of it now as like not having, as long as I know that I've done everything that I possibly can and I've prepared, then I feel good about what I did, and I let it go when it's over.
Right.
But if I really want it lingers, and I'll be asking about it, and I'll be bugging my reps, and I'll be doing all this stuff, and then I'll be upset. But like for like a day now, it used to ruin my life for months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that movie Swingers came out right around the time that I moved to LA.
Right.
And that's the neighborhood I live in generally, and even some of those guys are friends of mine. And there's a line in there where there's a couple of guys talking about rejection in a bar, and one of the guys says, I still haven't told my mom I didn't get Star Trek yet, and it's like it's been on the air for like 3 years or something at that point. I didn't get Deep Space Nine. Yeah, it's been on the air for like 4 or 5 years.
Right.
Yeah, it's weird, like, because you talk to your parents on the phone, and you're like, you're just filling time at the beginning, and you're going like, well, what's going on? Well, I'm going in for The Green Mile, it's a movie with Tom Hanks, and oh, great. And then, you went and you did one day, and you read, and you didn't get it. And 3 months later, it comes up again. Well, hey, what's going on with The Green Mile? And you're like, oh, fuck, I've already given up on this. Like, why'd you bring that up? And then, like, just opens a wound. So you just learn to stop.
Yes. We made the mistake. We had this. We finished our first film, and then a producer, came on board and offered us, the world with that same money amount attached to it.
Yeah.
And then we're going to get a star, and so you start telling people,
Yeah.
and then everything falls apart, and you're just. This is almost a year ago.
Well, it's human nature to want to share good news,
Absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, it can be. I haven't had anything too severe in that direction, but those can be. You can make that much more brutal on yourself.
Right.
Keep it under your hat.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about just kind of genre. I mean, with Innkeepers, Cheap Thrills, Starry Eyes, and just like working with Ty West and Travis Stevens and first time directors.
Yeah.
I do want to touch on the workshop you're doing.
Okay.
And if we have time, I do want to touch on Halloween 3.
Well, there's a whole podcast out there about that. I had the great pleasure of meeting Tom Atkins a few weeks ago.
Oh, man. He's incredible.
I did my first horror convention down there, Horror Hound in Cincinnati. We were talking about that, and he was two seats down from me. He's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Were you and AJ seated in the same area?
Yeah, we were next to each other for most of it, yeah.
So we're here at the Chattanooga Film Festival, and I mean, one of the things that struck Cam and I the most about it is it has a very great focus on kind of midnight movies and genre cinema. And over, some of the bigger things you've done over the last few years have been maybe not exactly genre specific, but they definitely feel like they fit the mold of something like this or like a midnight movie.
Yeah.
Kind of going back to Innkeepers, you talked earlier, that you take the roles that are offered to you. I mean, was that something that they came to you with?
Yeah. Well, I met Ty West at, I think, Los Angeles Film Festival in 2007 when I was out with Great World of Sound, and he had Trigger Man.
Okay.
And so we met a little bit.
Sure.
We had a lot of mutual friends. And then I saw House of the Devil, and I really just, it rocked me. I just thought that was just a great movie, and just it just sort of fell out of me like a ton of bricks. It just came out of nowhere.
Sure.
It was just perfect.
Right.
And so beautifully directed. And, I'm a cinephile. I love all kinds of movies, but I did have a certain affinity for cult movies because when I was young, my brother discovered the Danny Peary books, the cult movies books, and we found out about so many movies from those books. And in the days before home video was rampant and cable was rampant, it sometimes took us, maybe 20 years to see some of those movies.
Yeah.
They weren't available on until DVD, and even then some just recently.
Right.
So a lot of those films tend to be the midnight movies or in some cases horror films and stuff. Ty, right after I saw that movie, I got an email from our friend Amy Simetz, who's an actress, who said that Ty was looking for me, and I was ready to just I'd just seen it. I was like, I'll do whatever you want.
Sure.
And that's basically what I said,
Right.
And he's had a desire. I don't think it's any secret to get away from. He always has to get away from the horror genre.
Right.
He made his first film with Larry because Larry Fessenden was his mentor, and that's what got financed, and that's what continued to get financed. And even leading up to the Innkeepers, there were a few other projects that he was trying to do that was the one that got the money.
Sure.
That's where people, that's what people will pay to see, because he's such a talent. He's just such a. There's so few directors now with such a command over film language that he has, and the amazing work that he does, not only on the set but in particular in post with editing and sound design and all this stuff.
Right.
He really does understand filmmaking. So it's exciting now. He's just made this Western with Ethan Hawke and John Travolta that'll be out later this year, and shot on 35 out there in New Mexico, and I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure it's going to be great.
Sure.
I really just wanted to work with Ty, and we set it up, and it took a little while to cast the other actors. So Sarah and I really met the day before we started shooting, but we hit it off really well, and just had a natural chemistry with each other. And, we all of us, share a similar dumb sense of humor.
Right.
So that's
always helpful.
That's why it feels very much like people hanging out, having fun, because that's what we were doing, and we were living there, and we were eating there, and we were sleeping there.
Stayed there and everything.
Yeah, yeah. We never.
Wow. There
There were times where I realized where I went out to get something, and I realized I adjusted my eyes to the light that I hadn't left in 3 days.
Sure.
And so, that was because Ty had seen Great World of Sound and liked me in that. And And Evan doing, in between there was compliance, which obviously I'd done Great World of Sound with Craig, so he asked me to do that, even though it was a different role.
Sure.
And then Evan had seen Great World of Sound as well, Evan Katz.
Right.
And that was why he wanted me to do Cheap Thrills, because he wanted, there's a version of that movie that's very kooky and nutty and wacky, and he wanted a really grounded, realistic thing, and that it would be funny and horrific and all the things it needed to be if we played it right.
Well, you or David or Ethan could all easily have, made that. I mean, just...
And we all made a conscious decision not to do that.
Sure.
But the ironic thing was that, the producers, some of the producers were not convinced about hiring me, even though it was such a low budget. They always want to get some name that they can put, a head they can put on a video box. So, Compliance came out 2 months after I had met with Evan and Travis Stevens, and it opened in one theater in New York. It did very well and got great reviews, and I got great reviews, and that allowed them to hire me.
Sure.
But I don't even know that Evan knew that I could go to the depths that I could go to, because he didn't see the movie until a week after, because it didn't open up to L.A. till the week after, so he didn't see it until actually I hired me.
Wow.
So he just was sort of going on a gut instinct. So, but I had no plan to be, a horror movie actor or anything like that. And last weekend I did a convention. That's not something I thought I would ever do. But I used to go to those as kids, so it's like it was cool. And I didn't ever think of Cheap Thrills as a genre movie. It's a marketing label, and it's got some gore in it. And if it brings more people in to see it, that's great. But
I think what's interesting about Innkeepers to an extent, but definitely Cheap Thrills and Starry Eyes, and the fact that you're involved and that Travis is involved, is that it's this thing of these are films that defy genre expectations. Sure. So I would imagine that's attractive.
I mean, Starry Eyes was just a couple of days' work for me, and it was because Travis, I'd worked with on Cheap Thrills, and he asked me to do it, and I liked the part, or I should say, again, I saw that part could be, as written, it could be interpreted as just that part that you've seen before. And I said I would only do it if he's just completely sincere and he completely means everything he says.
Right.
And I
don't
said,
know, until your last.
Yeah, he's really the only person that cares about her. Right. And a similar thing happened on Innkeepers, where the scene where Sarah, where I'm trying to tell her that I have, am in love with her, and I can't. Right. I'm doing that very sincerely, and I'm very heartbroken when I'm doing it. But it's funny when you watch it because it's real, because we all know what that is. And I suppose, although I haven't had direct experience with that, being a manager or anything, I've certainly had my share of managers when I was younger, and I just thought, it would just be interesting, like on top of whatever else we've talked about, why I like to do parts. I want to do something different, and I want to do something that's interesting. And I like my work in that movie because it's different. You haven't seen that before, and I hadn't done it before, certainly. And but again, it wasn't like a plan, like, oh, here, let's start doing these things. And I think you have to be careful to a certain degree. I certainly get offered a lot of those kinds of movies, and I say no to a lot of them because they either aren't very good or don't pay well, or both. Right. It has to be, I say, I don't know if you guys swear on here or not, but I'll eat shit financially, creatively, or personally, but I won't do all three. Sure. I try to get 2 out of the 3. You're lucky to get 1. Right. You usually make money, or you really have a good creative experience, or you like the people that you worked with,
If you're eating shit creatively, though, it works out financially, because I think we've all probably been there. I mean, is that the one, those are the ones, do you ever feel like, I don't
ever regret it. I mean, if they pay the bills.
Right.
they pay the bills a lot because it's like television guest star work's been my bread and butter forever. I mean, I think I've done 40 or something. And those, if you get on a show I've done all the CBS crime procedurals, they just air all over the world all the time. So you're getting checks every 3 months.
Oh, wow.
And so it's and they're not bad. They're personally, they're great to work on, and they, you get treated really well, and the food is great, and you get your own room, and everybody's really nice and everything. It's just that you don't really get to do the kind of work that you'd like to do.
Sure. Yeah.
And because they're quick, they're written quickly, you get hired quickly, you shoot very quickly, and then 9 out of 10 times, all the work that you've done has been reduced to just your dialogue. Right. So any nuance or anything that you've done with the performance has just been reduced to exposition. So you just don't see anything, and
it's that great divider between film and television. I think is that was one of the things I thought was really interesting that you said before was you put it.
And we're talking about network stuff. I mean, obviously there's stuff in cable now that's
but you talk about just putting in that work and then it being reduced. That's something I had never considered before.
Yeah, well, you just learn, that was the thing I said about jumping in the You learn now. It's just I don't slack off. I put in just as much effort, and I give everybody what they need, and those are usually pretty long days.
Right.
But you just don't expect to see. I can go and look at Cheap Thrills or Compliance or Great World of Sound or even Starry Eyes and go and look at the work and be proud of it and learn from it. And the other stuff I just don't. It's not that I'm not proud of it. It's just nothing to be proud of. It's just not there.
Sure.
You don't come up with a backstory for your character on NCIS.
No, you do all the same stuff, but it just doesn't end up in it.
Right. Okay.
It just does not end up there. It's amazing.
Right.
It's to the nth degree. They just really cut back and forth to the heads talking.
Right, yeah.
And you just don't see any of it. And they'll pick takes for different reasons, Mm-hmm. Most filmmakers will pick the take that has the best performance, and they'll pick a take that's
the hair was a little better.
Oh, whatever, yeah.
Is there
whatever favors the star of the show,
Sure, right.
is not necessarily going to be the one that favors you. So,
are there any shows? And
I should say, I'm not under any illusion that it's about me when I'm there.
Right,
I know why I'm there and who it's for.
If you could, I don't know if this is a question you can answer, but if there was any show on cable or network that you could guest on or have a little role in, what would you pick?
Oh, God. There's so many good ones now. Obviously Breaking Bad is gone, but Better Call Saul would be great. But I've gone in for that. I wouldn't be surprised to get on that. I went in for Breaking Bad quite a bit, and it's just for one reason or another, it just never sort of happened. So, but the same people cast Better Call Saul, so that'd be great. Mm-hmm. I don't think there would ever be a reason for me to be on Game of Thrones, but obviously that would be just amazing. True Detective, I read for. I would have ended up being Ann Dowd's brother. Cary Fukunaga was a big fan of Compliance, so they'd read both of us, but they wanted the guy's described as a giant in the thing, so they really wanted a big guy. So it ended up. As soon as they asked me how tall I was, that conversation was over. I love Justified, but I think that's over now.
Yeah.
God, there's so many good ones, right?
Yeah.
Silicon Valley was the one that recently where they hired an older guy. I like that a lot. I like Veep a lot. Mm-hmm. I have some friends on Veep.
Yeah.
And I have that. I think that kind of dry humor is funny to me, and also I think I'm good at it. Mad Men is ending. God, all these shows are gone now. It's sad.
There'll be
getting
more to
sad.
take its place.
Yeah, I think I quite honestly, with the way things are right now. I mean, movies will always be the number one important thing to me, but a job on one of these really good cable shows would be great.
Sure.
Because you're in one place, especially if it was in LA, because then you'd be at home and you're playing one character, for a really long time. That's what's really satisfying about these bigger parts in these smaller movies is because you're really getting to do from soup to nuts,
Sure,
just like a full character, from beginning to end, and particularly with Cheap Thrills, which is like get to do everything I ever wanted to do in my entire career in one movie, So,
well, kind of talking about that, I mean, working with Evan, and then on Star Eyes as well. I mean, first-time directors for something of that scope. I mean, is that any different for you? I mean, and I know you've directed. I mean, is there an instinct to put your 2 cents in about something?
It all depends. I mean, I think the way I'm trying to say this without sounding like an asshole. I was doing this movie last summer in Chicago with a friend of mine who's directing. He's great, and it was all. It took place at a teenager's birthday party, and so it was all these kids in their late teens, early 20s.
Right.
And then they would come up to me a lot and be like, Steven's not saying anything. I don't know. I'm doing a bad job. And I'd say to them, you don't want him to say anything.
Right.
Actors are often insecure and need the coddling. But the fact of the matter is, if the director's not saying anything, you're doing great. Unless they're an idiot, and then you'll find out like when you're watching it. But usually you get a sense of it.
Right.
And I think directors, too, sometimes, especially first-timers, because I've done some shorts and things in the last couple of years, because, again, they're good roles and, pays a little money and it's not a huge commitment of time, who feel like they're supposed to talk a lot, or maybe they've read in books that actors like to talk, and it's like, I really don't. I like to do my homework and show up and play. And if you have adjustments and things, that's not to say like I won't ever listen to a director's note or anything like that, but I found that the better ones and the better work that I do tends to be people who hire you because you're you and not because they want to shape you into something that they think you should be, you know what I mean? That hasn't been discussed already before you've shown up on set. Sometimes you meet a director and it's like, oh, this is how we're going to do this character, But the people that hire you and then don't seemingly want to use you for what you do sort of baffle me.
Yeah.
And there's usually not a lot of talking that's involved with that because, we get it, we're on the same page, and I'm able to do it. There's adjustments here and there. But it's not to say that everything I do is, perfect. And I don't even like to watch the movie until it's fully cut because I like to see it with all the shit that I did cut out. And editors are very important. No actors ever thank editors in acceptance speeches, which I think is bizarre. I would like to break that tradition if I ever get up there. But, it just all depends. But I find that most...
You can thank any editor you want to, right here.
Oh, God. There's so many.
Is there any editor you worked with that you felt like was just...
There's a few I know, like Dylan Tishner is a guy that I work with on who did Magnolia and Jesse James, and he's somebody I have a personal relationship with, and he's just a brilliant guy, and he's really involved in the process from the beginning. From the beginning of the script, he's in conference with the director, and so he's trying to be a filmmaker himself, so I think that's part to do with it. He's very knowledgeable. There's great people like Jane Rizzo who edited Craig's films. That she's fantastic, and you can talk to her about stuff and trust her opinion because editors seem to need to have the best taste out of all of the people in the post. They really have to know what a good take is and why.
Sure.
And what cuts together well, and they have an innate sense of that, and that's why so many more editors make great directors than cinematographers. Cinematographers rarely make good directors.
That it feels sometimes like the editor might have a better idea of what the movie is actually going to be and should be than the director sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say that, but I would I would. It's so hard to say, you know. I mean,
well, they say you have 3 cracks at your movie. You have the script, you know, the
Yeah.
director's version and the editor's version.
it's rare that if you don't get it on the set that you're going to get it in the editing room, but so much of it is done in the editing room. If you ask Ty West, he would probably say, you know, that most of it is done there, you know. But, you know, if you asked, I mean, the editing in Cheap Thrills is, you know, top notch, but it was, everything was captured there on the set as it needed to be. So, you know, it's hard to say which, without really seeing, you know, everything laid out, and I'm really not there for that part of the process. And there are actors like Bradley Cooper who are, you know, very involved in the editing room almost every day, if they can be. My friend Crispin Struthers, who's someone I've known forever, who was a PA on my short films, edited. Was nominated for an Academy Award 2 years in a row for Silver Linings Playbook and An American Hustle. You know, and he's, you know, that's a whole deep involved process. And, you know, with those actors and Bradley in particular. And I just, unless I'm asked to, I just sort of like to do my work there. And there's also something though that, like, I, you know, sort of started with Zobel and something I always say with people: I will do it many different ways. If you want me to cry this time, if you want me to laugh that time, I won't sit there and say my character would never do that. I'll find a place. It's what I call metabolizing the information, you know. Even do it a little faster, do it a little slower. I have to take that in and see what that means to me internally, because if I do it mechanically, it's going to look mechanical. I have to do it so that it makes sense. And directors know that, and our actor has to, you know, take that in. And that's why I don't like a director to get too much, like, let's not talk about backstory and stuff like that, because it's better if you just say faster and then I'll figure, you know, that part of it out. But some of the things, like in Compliance, for example, are, you know, it's 2 sets, and we're really on the phone with each other the whole time, and there's a camera on each of us. Which is, you know, a remarkable feat of editing in and of itself. But some of the stuff that Craig and Jane did was, like, I would do one where I was being very nice, and I would do a different version of that same one where I was being really nasty, and you'd get different reactions out of Anne or Dream or whoever. But some of the reactions of me being nasty are contrasted with their reactions from me being nice. Sometimes you just, like, maybe even by accident find something there. And so I'm aware that it's and it helps that I began as a cinephile. Is that I'm super appreciative of the fact that ultimately it's going to be in their hands, and I'm willing to give them as much material as possible, as long as I can make it make sense to me. And quite frankly, if it doesn't make sense to me, it's probably not any good, and they probably won't use it anyway. But I'm happy to do it any number of ways, because in that sense, that kind of stuff is made in the editing room, can sometimes be made better.
Great.
Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to touch on, this weekend you're doing several acting workshops. I kind of wanted to know, like, what was, you know, what caused or what made you want to start doing that, and, you know, what are you trying to offer to you know?
I've had a lot of great teachers, you know, over the years, and I have a teacher in particular in LA, Joan Shekel, who teaches these labs for filmmakers mostly, but she does teach master acting class as well, and the classes are to help filmmakers. It's a lot of, like, first-time filmmakers or people who are, like, there's been music, you know, very successful commercial music video directors like John Dayton, Valerie Ferris, we did Little Miss Sunshine in there, or Jake Scott, and who maybe don't have as much experience working with scripted material or actors. And her focus is really on making all that stuff work together. And, you know, you'll get a free acting class because as an actor you can volunteer, but, you know, to help these directors out. But, you know, a lot of the work is making the scene. It's not enough just to be realistic, because, you know, we have a lot of realistic acting on TV, which is a lot of, like, people talking like this, and it's supposed to be like, but it's not interesting, you know what I mean? And a lot of what I was just talking about with the editing can make a scene more dynamic if it has, you know, peaks and valleys. And so it's a lot of work the sort of basic work will be in doing these sort of 2-page scenes from things, finding an overall action for a scene, and then there's beat changes, and those are the things that give it the dynamism that a scene has and needs. It makes it pop, and you'll find that you'll have the actors read through it and naturally find where the beat changes is. Like a change in tone or a movement will happen naturally and go, that's a beat change. And we'll find separate actions for each beat change.
Right.
And we'll actually want to move physically on each beat change.
Right.
This is just one of the many things, but it's good for film acting in particular because oftentimes that's where the cuts will be and that's where you'll find it. Like they will find editing ideas on the set.
Yeah.
Doing from what an actor does,
right.
And it could be a surprise to all of us in that moment. And, just getting down and with a group of people, there's, 5 groups of 2 people, we're going to do scenes, and we're going to do that work, at least start off doing that, and we're going to explore things physically, some of it is picking really strong action verbs and then, let's physicalize what that word means to you because you can discover, so many things within that. Or trying this really intense scene like we're laughing about it. Let's see what happens. Maybe one good idea comes out of that that you can use in the scene. It's worthwhile. And mostly it's just really, it's playing. So much of this work and why I love acting the most is, it combines all of the intellectual, the emotional, the physical, and that comes about as close to something spiritual as I can think of for myself.
Sure.
And it's fun. It's cathartic.
Right.
And it shouldn't be, tense. In fact, if you're tense, you're physically cutting off, modes of expression, and you're going to get mentally and emotionally tense too.
Sure.
Is this the sort of thing you felt like as a younger person you could have benefited from?
I remember I took a movement class in college, maybe my sophomore year of college, and the first thing they do is you wear you can wear your underwear, you can wear a swimsuit or whatever. I don't think they do it anymore because somebody got in trouble because they were told, somebody made them strip down to their underwear, and somebody who wasn't in the theater department. But and they take pictures of you and you look at them. And I was the guy who stuck his neck way out like this, and his head was ahead of him all the time. And then, the rest of my body just didn't get used, And it was just like a thing of, relaxing back into myself. As soon as I did that, and it's like you open up all these pathways of people can't see what I'm doing now, but
No, I'm trying it though.
Yeah, it's just you plant your feet and your head goes back, and it's not all stuck in here. It's not all intellectual. It's really using your entire body as an instrument. And that's your voice, that's, every limb you have, it's every sort of fiber of your being. And when you're really hitting it, you're really, in that place.
Sure.
Cheap Thrills is the thing that I'm most proud of because it's, really accessing all of that and really using all of those tools that I've learned and putting them into practice, for all the different things that happen in the movie. Sometimes quite, vibrantly physical.
Sure.
That just makes, I think, again, you don't have to like somebody, but you have to find it interesting and compelling to watch, and talking heads, like we're talking about on the TV shows, to me, not compelling, but a lot of people don't actually watch those. If they watch, they have them on. One of the best things I ever heard was Leslie Nielsen talking about Police Squad, the show, before they did the movies.
Right.
He said the reason that the show wasn't successful is because you had to watch it. You actually had to look at it to get the jokes. I think a lot of people have these shows on and it has a certain rhythm and the people are talking and the crime is solved and you can kind of half watch it and do your laundry or whatever.
Right.
You can watch 5 in a row on Netflix and make the dinner and do all the stuff you got to do. That's not that's not really what I'm interested in doing unless it's not eating shit financially, as we talked about. It's a different thing.
Well, Pat, thank you so much for your
time. Thanks, guys. I really enjoyed it.
It's been a blast. That wraps it up for another Bigger Show. You have been
Cameron B. Childs.
I have been Mike D. Thank y'all so much for listening. We will catch you next week. Goodbye.
We're gonna need a big show. We're gonna need a big show with Mike